Hello, I am so thrilled that you are here. Today I am all about mixed media. With a trio of cards featuring some Unity Stamp Company stamps and papers, we're going to keep it all simple with easy techniques that bring out all those vintage vibes with just a hint of shimmer. So let's get started and assemble these cards. Let's take a look at some of the basics. I have some watercolor paper and then also some paper from Unity called Grit and Grace. I just picked out 3 patterns that I thought were really pretty. And then my mom gave me these really old typewriter papers. I just thought they were really cool. They're already antiqued. So that kind of adds to like the coolness factor of these cards. I stamped the flower and sentiments from Ink and Bloom Camellia using some VersaFine ink because it's permanent and waterproof. So these vintage cards are all about layering. We are going to be layering up lots of mediums, trying different techniques, and just building a lot of collage type looks using stamps, paper, a little bit of shimmer paste, and layering that all up is going to give us that really cool, unique look. So I'm starting with the background. I have that watercolor paper and I'm just ink smooshing on some vintage photo distress ink. I'm doing all my layers. I did my background layer, I'm doing all my papers, I'm doing the stamped flowers. I did my backgrounds first so they could dry a little bit and then I can build up a little bit more color. I'm just pressing that ink onto my craft mat, adding a little bit of water and then smushing it in there, and then I'll pick it up with my brush and kind of brush it over the top as well. Just creates a lot of different dimension in our background. Next up, I'm going to be doing some stamping. This is the Gentle Hours stamp set. Again, I'm using that VersaFine ink, and I'm just stamping randomly in probably 2 corners or 2 or 3 places. The other stamp set I am using is called Beautiful Moments, and I love that this stamp has like all this texture with the butterflies and the script already built into it. And then I'm going to come in with a little bit of distress dots. This is VersaFine ink in vintage sepia, and I'm just kind of building up. I don't really know where anything is going at this point. I'm just adding things. Every layer just kind of adds to the next layer. We may see some of these things later, we may not. Just kind of is a process. I'm just having fun. I'm just starting out with a base, and then wherever the creativity will lead me is where I will go. So some of this may be covered up, and so it may feel like you're doing a lot for nothing, but lots of those things will kind of show through in the end as well. So it's just kind of fun to play. Just add things. If you don't like something that you've added, you can always cover it up. Like with pattern papers here, if I don't like something, I can always cover it up with that paper because you can't see through it. Or you could use like thin paper so you do see through it, washi tape. There's lots of mediums out there that you can play with. So I tore away some pieces. I know I'm just going to use probably 2 pieces per card, and I'm just putting them in the corners that I think that works, ink blending the edges so they're not so disjointed against that background. Now I grabbed some clear primer. This is just something I had in my bucket of stuff. I usually like to use like gel medium or clear gesso, but I didn't have it. So I'm using this. It's very similar to Mod Podge, so a collaging medium. It's very glue-like, and that's what I'm going to use to adhere all my pieces down. It creates a nice solid adhesion. All my layers are sealed in, and this does have a hint of a glossy finish, which I don't particularly like. I prefer a matte finish, but it's not bad in the end. I'm not mad at it either. So this kind of seals in all of our colors, all that ink blending, so it won't be lifted up by the next layer. So I'm just going to lay that down, and then I'll lay down some more in this corner, and then I'll seal in that other piece of torn paper. Now I'm creating 3 cards at one time because I have all my stuff out, so I might as well, get my most bang for my buck. So I'm creating 3 at a time, kind of focusing only on showing you maybe 1 card because it's the same technique for all of them. I'm just placing my papers in different areas or doing different tearing sizes. So they're all basically the same technique. They just have a slight difference. And I like to do cards in 3s like this, so they're very similar. I have all my supplies out, so I don't have to dig everything out every single time, but I can get a different look. by just changing the color, changing the pattern paper, changing the size of those torn pieces of paper, and that way it feels like each one is different, but they're all very similar. So I'm pulling back out that stamped typewriter paper. If you don't have typewriter paper, which I understand, most people don't, you could use like some thin watercolor paper, tissue paper, tracing paper, rice paper. Any of those would probably work just as well. I am using some carrying markers, watercolor markers, and just brushing that on really haphazardly. I'm not even taking care. I'm just brushing it over those flowers using a water brush and filling that in so it gets a kind of vintage watercolor look. And each flower is going to be colored differently. So I have the purple one, the pink one, and the blue one. And that way I can kind of switch up the mood of each card and kind of pair it with the sentiments. And once they were dry, I'm just going to fussy cut these out. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm going to collage it on to the top of my card base. And these are all still fairly wet. You can do wet on wet with this glue, and it actually works well if you kind of do that quickly so it doesn't dry between each layer. And you want a thin but good coverage. You don't want it to be really thick. So I'm using my paintbrush to do a nice even layer. If it extends out to where I've done before, that's not a bad thing. And then I'm going to dry these really quickly with a heat tool just because I don't have patience to wait. And then to kind of blend this in, I'm just going to do a little bit of ink blending around the edge of those fussy cut flowers. And that just kind of blends it into the background a little bit better. This typewriter paper was a bit more opaque than I was expecting. And then now I'm going to layer on some more stamping, pulled out that Gentle Hours stamp set and used all the little elements that are in that kit. And I'm just going to stamp over the flowers and add a little bit of text here and there. I'm using, again, that VersaFine ink. I did have to be careful because once it layered over that clear primer, it could smear. So I was just trying to not smear it when I added some more glue. And then I'm just finishing off with a little bit more of that distressed dots using the VersaFine in Vintage Sepia. Perfect. I love how these turned out. Just going to give you a quick peek before we add the sentiments. I trimmed these down, tore off one side, and then I'm going to ink blend around the edges using that vintage photo. Just to kind of age them a little bit. They seem to be really stark against my background, as you can tell. So I'm just going to add a little bit of ink blending and then glue those down. I did tap over some glue on top of that ink from before. I just wanted to make sure it was set and that it didn't smear when I accidentally touched it. So I'm just kind of sealing that in, and then I'll glue down each sentiment in a position that I like. You can always pick what fits best for you. I like to put down a little bit of glue and then put glue on the back and then seal it all in right over on top. Kind of have to be careful. I did put that down onto the glue, so my sentiment could have been picked up, so I don't really recommend doing that. And then once they were all placed, I'm going to give them a good dry, and then I trim them down to size. And then I'm going to add a bit of stenciling using some lunar paste and cookie dough. I love the shimmer that it adds. It's a very champagne-y color and it's pretty translucent, but it has a good amount of shine. The light really picks it up in the camera, but when you look at it in person, it's a bit more translucent. Like you can see through it, but it does pick up the light when it turns, so it's really kind of pretty. I'm using the bubble layering stencil from Tim Holtz just to kind of add a little bit of texture and shine in 3 places on each card, just kind of in a triangle. I love the shine that it adds and a little bit of texture because it's a little bit thick but not too thick. And I'm using my finger just because I can control that layer just a little bit better. And then a little bit more ink blending to blend in those sentiments. Next, I'm going to grab my scissors and really just dress up the edge. This clear primer has really thickened everything up, giving it a lot of structure. Everything's nice and glued together, so it really takes a good amount of effort. And I want there to be some tears. I want there to be some random distressed edges, really kind of roughed up. So I'm given this a really good workout. Really wanted to kind of slide in there and to cut it because that looks really cool when we put that onto our card base. It'll create a lot of cool antiquing and distress to that edging. So I'm just roughing it up using my scissors. Next, I grabbed some walnut stain distress ink. This is a bit darker than what I've been using to really create some contrast. And here I'm going to ink up that torn edge where my scissors really sliced in. And then I'm going to ink blend all the way around. I don't want there to be a white edge. So I'm kind of hiding the white of the watercolor paper and then also creating like a vignette around it as well. Just really creates dimension in the edge of the card from the center of the card. Perfect. Next, I have some card bases covered with black cardstock. I'm just going to glue these straight down. The glue is really going to give us a really solid adhesion. These are pretty heavy. They're thick and they are kind of warped a little bit. So this will help kind of flatten everything out by using liquid glue. I'm going to grab a clear block. Just hold that in place so it gets a real nice solid adhesion. Here are the finished cards. I love how the mixed media brings out something a little different in each one, even using the same supplies and techniques. The colors, layers, and textures all come together in a beautiful way with a lovely vintage feel and a hint of shimmer. All the supplies are listed below and on my dollhouse-designs.com blog. Thank you so much for creating with me. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again soon for another video. Bye!